A newly leaked document reveals the new plan by Netanyahu and his regime to thin out the Gazans to the lowest possible number. Here's the report from Middle East Monitor that I want to read to you here. Israel's Israel Hayom newspaper revealed on Friday that the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, Ron Dermer, is preparing a plan requested by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu aimed at reducing the number of Palestinian citizens in the Gaza Strip to the minimum possible following the aggression, the Israeli army on the Strip. Now, Ron Dermer, who is the Israel Minister of Strategic Affairs, is an American who made his aliyah to Israel, and he was born and raised in Miami Beach, went to Wharton School of Business, then ran off to Israel, and now he's now their Minister of Strategic Affairs. And he's apparently been putting together this plan to thin out the Gazans from the Gazan Strip. Well, we're going to find out what that means exactly. What do you mean by thin out the Gazans? As they've restarted their bombing campaign, and now we're up to over 15,000 Gazans have been killed, and just in the last, since they've started bombing again, close to 1,000 have been killed. Goes on to say in the Middle East Monitor, the newspaper pointed out that despite the international community's position and the military's establishment in Tel Aviv on the plan, Netanyahu sees its implementation as a strategic goal for his government. So yeah, Netanyahu is an ideologue, and his big agenda has always been to make all the land Israel. So he gloated about dismantling the Oslo Accords. He does not want to see a two-state solution. He's held firm that the only Palestinian state, he's been saying this since he's a young man, the only Palestinian state that should exist is the state of Jordan, and that is it. And the rest of the land that is there is the land of Israel. That is his ideological goals. And now he's got an opportunity before he's going to be ousted from the government forever to try to accomplish this. And that's why he's so dangerous, because he's so radical. Goes on to say, it added that Netanyahu seeks to implement the plan without having to face a confrontation with the U.S., the international community, and Egypt, which categorically opposes it, pointing out that those close to Netanyahu clarified that the plan does not express an intention to expel the Palestinians, but an attempt to reduce the population density in the Gaza Strip. So somebody explain that to me. So if you're not going to thin out the numbers and reduce the numbers of the population of Gaza to the minimum, if you're not going to expel them in order to get to that, how else do you do that? The newspaper reported that Israel could bypass the Egyptian opposition to implement the plan by enabling Gazans to leave the Strip by sea and head to Europe and Africa. So clearly they're thinning it out by bombing the bombing campaign. They're certainly thinning out the place, but they also intend on putting these Palestinians on boats. They're saying, all right, fine. If Egypt won't let you in their border, we're just going to put you on boats. We're going to ship you out to the sea. We're just going to send you to the sea and let the boat take you where the boat takes you. So they're saying, we're not going to stop your boats. We're not going to intervene or interfere. We're just going to put you on a boat and have you sail away. And maybe you'll sail away to Europe. Maybe you'll sail away to Africa, but then you'll become their problem. So he's basically saying that one of the plans to thin out the Gazans is to put them on boats and to make them refugees and ship them off to Europe. Do you think Europe's going to take well to this? I mean, they're seeing all these protests in Europe. They're like, well, they clearly like the Palestinians. They're against us. So I guess they can have the Palestinians if that's what they're going to do. So they're going to expel them and looks like massacre them and put them in the sea and just say, we hope you survive. We hope you make it. A lot of refugees by boat do not make it. So the head of the Yisrael Biennitu Party, Biennu Party. Sorry, I'm slaughtering all of these words, all these names today. Avigdor Lieberman called for the U.S. to pressure Egypt to take control of the Gaza Strip after the aggression in Gaza, as well as forcing Jordan to control Area A, which is in the West Bank, which includes the largest Palestinian population in the West Bank. So let's go over this one. The idea from Avigdor Lieberman. So he's wanting Egypt to take control over the Gaza Strip and basically annex the Gaza Strip and have the Gazans be their problem. rather than a problem for the Israelis having to take care of them and help them rebuild after demolishing them. And he also wants Jordan to take control of Area A in the West Bank. So that would, Area A it's like reservations. It's equivalent to Indian reservations in the United States. Um, it's not a cohesive piece of land. It's just little towns and villages and cities throughout the West Bank, and it's separated by areas B and C, which apparently Israel wants to keep that land, and they just want Jordan to come in and implement governmental controls over the populated little portions like Swiss cheese of the West Bank. What's interesting about this plan is that this was already done, and then Israel went and actually took that land back. So there was a period of time before the 1967 war when the West Bank was annexed by Jordan and the Gazans were annexed by Egypt. And during that time, the Palestinians in the West Bank were given Jordanian passports and they were given Jordanian rights, and they were treated well, and they were under Jordanian control. Same thing for the Gazans when it was under Egyptian control. Then the Israelis started a war in 1967. They did what they say, oh no, we didn't start the war. We did preemptive strikes. That's not us starting a war. Like how they frame everything in a way to where you're gaslit into thinking something that happened didn't happen. So they're saying, no, we didn't start it. We didn't fire first. We did preemptive striking. They were going to fire on us first, and we just preempted their first strike. I mean, it's just a bunch of crap. So they started a war in 1967. They fired at Egypt. It caused a larger aggression. That war spread. Jordan got involved. Syria got involved. These other countries got involved. And in the end, Israel took back. They took Gaza. They took the West Bank. And they also took the rest of the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. So they annexed a ton of land. And meanwhile, when they annexed this land, they did not give the rights to these Palestinian people. They didn't give them full Israeli rights. If you're going to take the land, the thing to do from that point on is to actually give those people rights. We did that here in the United States when after the war with Mexico, when the United States won California and New Mexico and all these areas, the U.S. then did agreements with the people, who were Mexican nationals, who then suddenly found themselves living on American soil because the U.S. took that land, annexed that land, and actually paid Mexico for that land. And they were given U.S. citizenship, and their land rights were enshrined in the treaty. So their land was protected, and they were given U.S. citizenship. That is not something that has ever been given to the Palestinians by Israel. They take the land, and then they just subjugate the people rather than and oppress them, keep them under military occupation rather than giving them true rights and true courts and real rules and real laws. They instead have kept them under military occupation. What's interesting is that Avigdor Lieberman is actually proposing going back to this kind of, except for the Swiss cheese part of the West Bank. They wouldn't give all of the West Bank to Jordan to control, just only parts of it. Really just trying to alleviate themselves of the burden of the Palestinian people of having to care for them, the human rights of them, and to give them citizenship as you would normally do when you annex land. That at some point you give these people citizenship, you give them all the rights of the people on your land. Native Americans in the United States are Americans. If they want to live on the reservations, they can choose to do that. Otherwise, they're allowed to leave those reservations and live within U.S. population, and they're given all the same exact rights as any other American. Even Puerto Ricans, when they come and live in America on the mainland, they're given rights. They're given all the same rights as U.S. citizens, even though they're a territory of the United States. But Israel is not following that path, and instead, they have just been oppressing the Palestinian people. In a post on X, Lieberman, who was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Security, and Finance, considered that Egypt's control over the Gaza Strip and Jordan's control over the populated areas in the West Bank is an alternative to the two-state solution, which he says is unrealistic. So instead, he just wants, okay, you guys can have that land back, kind of, when it comes to the West Bank. Not all the West Bank, even though that's probably a better solution, and that's probably what they should do, is give all of the West Bank to Jordan and give all of the Gaza Strip to Egypt. That is not going to be popular with the Palestinian people. But at this point, what we do know is that Israel cannot be in control of these people. That Israel has shown its that it is trying to annihilate these people, wanting to shove them off into the sea, wanting to shove them through Egypt, wanting to gain this land. They don't have any interest in human rights of these people, of treating these people like human beings. Instead, they treat them like human shields that they can just blow up. And so now there is this plan to somehow get rid of the Gazans, and that is Netanyahu's end goal here. According to Reuters, and now we're seeing this actually happening, and how they're thinning this out, because according to Reuters, intense Israeli airstrikes hit the south of the Gaza Strip on Monday. Now remember, everybody was told to go south, killing and wounding dozens of Palestinians, including in areas where Israel had told people to seek shelter. So Israel says, go south, go south. Here we are. We're being so humanitarian. No military in the world is as humane and moral as us. We actually try to tell the civilians to get out of the war zone, and we tell them where to go. And then they tell them where to go. They herd them to the south. And what do they do now? They say, oh, you're in the wrong part of the south. We need to move you somewhere else. So you went where I told you to go, and now I need you to go again. Because what they're doing, and what I've said since the beginning of this conflict, is they're herding them, they're pushing them, they're pushing them. They're going to start at the north, and they're going to move their way through the Gaza Strip until they push everybody to that Rafah border crossing. And then they could say to Egypt, where else can these people go? Into the sea or into Egypt? Take your pick. Do you really want 2 million lives? 2 million lives on your hands, like the blood of these 2 million. Do you really want them on your hands, Egypt? Meanwhile, it's actually Israel doing it. Here's the Reuters article saying, intense Israeli airstrikes hit the south of the Gaza Strip on Monday, killing and wounding dozens of Palestinians, including in areas where Israel had told people to seek shelter, residents and journalists on the ground said. Israeli troops and tanks also pressed their ground campaign against Hamas militants in the south of the enclave, after having largely gained control of the now devastated north. So at the United Nations, Secretary General Antonio Guterres appealed to Israel to avoid further action that would make the already dire humanitarian situation in Gaza worse and to spare civilians from more suffering. Quote, for people ordered to evacuate, there is nowhere safe to go and very little to survive on, a UN spokesperson, Stephanie Dujarric, said. Israel's closest ally, the United States, has repeatedly urged it to do more to protect civilians and said the Israeli offensive in the south should not repeat the massive civilian toll it has had in the north. They're clearly not listening to that, because they've already killed over close to 1,000 people since they've started their bombing campaign again. It says about 900 people have been killed in Israel's airstrikes since the truce ended on Friday. So 1,000 people over the weekend. According to the Gaza Health authorities, on Monday, top U.S. officials said it was too early to make a definitive assessment on whether Israel was following U.S. advice to take concrete steps to ensure protections for civilians, although a State Department spokesperson called some aspects of the offensive in southern Gaza an improvement. So they're saying, well, it's too early to make a definitive assessment on whether or not they're actually trying to spare civilian lives. Meanwhile, nearly 1,000 are dead since over the weekend. It doesn't seem like, how much more information do you need? Early on Monday, Israel ordered Palestinians to leave parts of Gaza's main southern city, Khan Yunis, but residents said that the areas which they had been told to go to were also coming under fire. Israel's military posted a map on social media platform X with around a quarter of Khan Yunis marked off in yellow as territory that must be evacuated at once. 3 arrows. Now listen to this. So they're telling everybody that's in the south, get out. You have to move. And then they show 3 arrows, and guess where the arrows point? And they're like, go that way, go that way. They go south and they go west, telling people to head towards the Mediterranean and towards Rafah. So go towards the sea and go towards Egypt, Israel says. That's where you're safest, right? Because they are hurting them. And now, according to the plan, the leaked document that leaked to this Israeli newspaper outlet of Netanyahu's plan is to put them in the sea, is to literally say they either go into Egypt, if you let them, open the crossing, let these people in, or we're going to put them on boats and we're sending them to the sea. So, of course, where are they going to put all these people now? They're herding them. 2 million people, they're herding them to a little tiny area right by Egypt and right by the sea. So how much more evidence do we need that this is their plan, that their plan all along? I mean, people like myself have been saying all along, this is the plan, is to get rid of these people somehow, and they're going to just keep shoving them south. And this is what they're going to do. And this is what they've done. So at what point are people going to speak up and say, this is genocide, this is ethnic cleansing, that is what this is? And the Israelis could sit there and say until they're blue in the face, no, that's not what this is at all. We are humane, we are moral, we warn people. Somebody actually posted on X the comment of, well, what kind of military? I mean, Israel's so great, they're so wonderful that they actually tell people to evacuate. They say, what other military in the world actually calls people and says, evacuate, you're in a war area, we're coming, we're going to bomb you, we're going to bomb that area, you need to get out. And this person was trying to say, so isn't Israel so wonderful because they're actually evacuating people? And no, the answer to that is, look, this war is over land. That's what this war is over. So if Israel's calling all these people and say, get off the land, no, that is not this nice humanitarian thing to do. That's a strategy towards winning their end goal in the war, which is to gain the land and to get rid of these people. That's what they're doing. There's nothing humane or moral about this. But we're watching this plan being implemented in real time, and the U.S. government has the power to stop it. They have the power to sit Israel down and say, you will get no more funding from us. We will not be complicit in your genocide, in your ethnic cleansing campaign. We're not going to stand by and let you do this. In fact, we should be fighting them. In fact, we should be rescuing the Palestinian people from the ethnic cleansing campaign that they're clearly being under, that they're clearly that is happening to them, and that's been happening to them for a long time. But instead, we're just giving soft suggestions to Israel, watching them slaughter more hundreds of people and saying, I think they're trying. I think so. I think they're, fewer kids were killed, I think. Meanwhile, when it comes to the hospitals, right, we've seen this go on in Israel this whole time. They've been targeting hospitals and saying, well, that's because Hamas is there. It's not our fault. Human shields. Well, today, the WHO received notification that the Israelis were going to be bombing the WHO in Gaza. Like I said, I always thought the WHO was maybe a terrorist organization, and now that the IDF is confirming it, that the WHO is Hamas, it turns out. Here's the tweet from Dr. Tedros. He's the head of the WHO. He says, today, the WHO received notification from the Israeli Defense Forces that we should remove our supplies from our medical warehouse in southern Gaza within 24 hours, as ground operations will put it beyond use. We appeal to Israel to withdraw the order and take every possible measure to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, including hospitals and humanitarian facilities. So there it is. I mean, Israel's even going after the WHO. Nobody is safe. Nobody is safe from Israel trying to annihilate all of the resources for the Gazan people to keep them safe and to keep them thriving to some degree, to keep them alive in Gaza. They're targeting they're targeting all of their main infrastructure. The main infrastructure being the infrastructure for medical care. They're targeting schools. They've been blowing up schools. They've been blowing up hospitals. They've been rendering them useless. And they say, oh, no, but it's because Hamas. I guess the WHO is a Hamas headquarters now. So it's Hamas. It's because of Hamas. And really what they're doing is they're trying to get the situation so dire for the Gazans that they jump on the boats or they jump into the sea and they start swimming, or to try to get to Egypt. They do everything they can to get themselves into Egypt. They're trying to make it so dire and so desperate that these people will do anything to get out of there. That's their goal. And this is one of the ways, by targeting the WHO. I mean, I make a joke out of it, but there's really no joke about this. This is a really terrible thing to be targeting one of the last bits of infrastructure the Gazans have for medical supplies. And they're going after the WHO. They've gone after journalists. They've gone after, and they all say, they use the same excuse, and you could choose to believe it or not. You could choose to just close your eyes and ears and say, well, they told me it was for a good reason, so it must be. Or you could just believe all of the evidence that's out there in front of all of us, which is, this is an ethnic cleansing campaign. If this is not genocide, I do not know what the term means. People believe that in order for there to be genocide, you have to kill everybody. That is not the case. You only need to keep the numbers low enough to where they're not a problem for you. Right? They're a minority. One way a genocide could be an ethnic cleansing campaign for purity, right? It could be because you just want one type of people living in your area, in your community. You don't want these others because you find them filthy or whatever reason you deem them unpleasant and you don't want them around at all. So one of the reasons for genocide could be purity, but another reason could be for majority because you want to remain in power, you want to remain the majority. So what you do is you thin out the population of the others to keep yourself in a position of power by maintaining majority. And that is what Israel's doing. People point to Israel and they say, well, they've got Arabs living in Israel. 20% of the population are Palestinians who are still in Israel. Yeah, well, they're not a threat. They're only 20%. They have absolutely no political power. They are a minority of a minority. And so they have no political power whatsoever. And that is one way that you keep, you stay in power is by just keeping the numbers low, by thinning out the numbers to the point where they do not pose any single threat to you. And that is what these Israelis are trying to do with Gaza. They're thinning down the numbers so that if they were forced to somehow integrate these people in, or if they're forced to have to care for them and to rebuild, that it's for a minimal group of people, small numbers, no real threat to Israel. In a democratic situation, these people will not be able to vote their way into changing Israel's society, or just if they were to be forced to integrate them the way the world wants them to, at least that integrating would be minor because there's just not that many of them and there's way more of us. So genocide could happen to maintain majority, not just for purity. And that is an important point for people to remember.